One sentence that will make a narcissist fear you forever. There's a sentence, a single line, that doesn't scream, doesn't beg, doesn't explain. It declares. And when it's spoken with clarity and conviction, it sends shivers down the spine of every narcissist who ever tried to manipulate you. Because it exposes what they fear the most, your self-possession. Today, you're going to learn what that sentence is, and you'll feel the fire rising in your soul as we uncover 6 transformational truths that will show you how to own your power, end their control, and never be afraid again. I don't need you, and I never did. There comes a moment in life where the fog lifts, where everything that once confused you suddenly becomes crystal clear. That moment doesn't arrive with fanfare. It doesn't need applause. It arrives with silence and certainty. That moment is the second you look the narcissist in the eye, or in your memory, and say the one sentence they never believed you'd have the strength to say, I don't need you, and I never did. Because for years, they made you feel like your breath came from their approval, like your worth was on layaway in their emotional store, like if you didn't please them, perform for them, pacify them, you'd be alone, unloved, unchosen. They made themselves the oxygen in your world, and then rationed it drop by drop. And you, good, hearted and hungry for connection, played their game just to keep the air flowing. But the lie is shattered now. You never needed them, not really. You were strong before they walked in. You just didn't know it. You were valuable before they validated. You were enough long before they made you feel like you were too much. And now the truth has ignited in your soul like wildfire. They were never your source. That sentence, those 8 words, are the sledgehammer to their entire illusion. When you say it, you're not just breaking up with a person. You're breaking up with a belief, a toxic pattern, a lifetime of mental conditioning that said you had to earn love, perform for peace, beg for belonging. That's what truly terrifies the narcissist. Because if you don't need them, their role in your life evaporates like smoke. They needed to believe you were powerless. They invested in your dependency. They fed off it. It gave them control. It gave them purpose. And it gave them the perfect distraction from their own emptiness. But the second you say, I don't need you, and I never did, you rob them of that identity. You rip the mask from their face. You unmake the myth that they ever held power over you. And you don't say it to hurt them. You say it to heal you, because this sentence isn't revenge. It's resurrection. It's not a dagger, it's a declaration. It's the sound of chains falling off your soul. It's the first breath of freedom after years of emotional suffocation. And when it leaves your lips, or even just your mind, it echoes with the thunder of your rebirth. They will panic, they will rage, they will twist your words, they will act like you're ungrateful, disloyal, heartless. But don't you dare back down. That reaction is proof that the spell is broken. They're not afraid of your cruelty. They're afraid of your clarity. They're not afraid of your distance. They're afraid of your discovery. They know they can't manipulate someone who has nothing to prove, because here's the truth they never wanted you to figure out. You are whole without them. You are light without their approval. You are worthy without their praise. And once you know this, once you own this, they become irrelevant. Not because you hate them, not because you need to punish them, but because you finally know who you are. And they no longer get to define you. Everything changes when you stop needing what once enslaved you. Your eyes open, your spine straightens, your voice steadies, you walk differently, you speak differently, you choose differently. You stop explaining yourself to people who refuse to understand you. You stop auditioning for roles you were never meant to play. You stop shrinking to fit in spaces you've already outgrown. The narcissist may have thought they broke you, but they didn't break you. They broke the illusion. And from that brokenness, something more powerful emerged. Your unshakable self-respect, your non-negotiable boundaries, your refusal to abandon yourself just to make someone else comfortable. That's the real threat. Not your anger, not your exit, but your evolution. This sentence isn't just for them. It's for every part of you that doubted you could survive without their validation. For the inner child who thought love meant sacrifice. For the younger version of you who kept trying to earn someone's affection by bleeding for it. It's for your future self too, the one who will never again confuse attachment with connection or control with care. You're not the same person anymore. You've seen too much. You've felt too much. You've lost too much to go back to sleep. You are awake now, awake to your worth, awake to your calling, awake to your own divine, unstoppable power. And when you speak that sentence, the universe leans in and says, that's it. That's the moment they came home to themselves. You will grieve the fantasy of who they pretended to be. You'll mourn the hope you held onto. But don't mistake that grief for weakness. That's healing. That's you shedding old skin, old stories, old scars. That's you stepping out of survival mode and into self-leadership. And the narcissist won't know what hit them, because nothing is more dangerous to their control than a soul who no longer needs them to feel whole. You will be tested. They may try to hoover. They may try to bait you back in. But now you have your sentence. You have your sword. And you will not trade your peace for their approval. You will not shrink your truth to fit their fantasy. You will not betray yourself to soothe their ego. You're not playing small anymore. From this day forward, that sentence becomes your mantra, a boundary, a battle cry, a new belief burned into your spirit. I don't need you, and I never did. Say it in your mind. Say it in your silence. Say it when the ghost of their voice tries to sneak back in, and feel the power surge through you every time, because now you know the truth. You never needed them, and that makes you unstoppable. The narcissist's power is an illusion, and you just snap the spell. For so long, they wore the crown in your mind. They stood tall, loud, and all-consuming in your world. Their moods dictated your days. Their silence became your punishment. Their approval was your oxygen, but all of it, every bit of it, was smoke and mirrors. The power they had over you was never real. It was borrowed. It was manipulated. It was a trick of emotional light. And now that spell is broken. You've woken up. Because the greatest lie the narcissist ever told was not with their words. It was with their energy. It was in how they made you feel small just by walking into a room. How they made you question yourself with a single look. How they turned your strengths into shame and your kindness into ammunition. They spun your heart into a maze, then blamed you for getting lost in it. But illusions are fragile things. They depend on your belief to stay alive. They need your fear, your silence, your confusion to keep functioning. The moment you say, wait a minute, this isn't real, this power they have is fake, the entire house of cards begins to fall. Because without your cooperation, their control disintegrates. See, they never controlled you by force. They controlled you by narrative. They sold you a story, that they were the prize, that you were replaceable, that they were the authority on who you are. And you, being empathetic, being loyal, being hopeful, believed them. But now your eyes are open. You realize they were just a scared little soul dressing themselves in dominance. They played the role of God in your life while hiding their own brokenness. They talked down to you to elevate their empty self. They criticized your light because it made their darkness feel exposed. But now you see it for what it is, and that terrifies them. Because when you stop playing the role they assigned you, you become a mirror they can't bear to look at. What happens when the illusion cracks? The narcissist loses their grip. They lash out, they smear, they spiral. Because your awakening means their illusion is dying, and narcissists survive on illusion. They are addicted to the fantasy that they are special, superior, untouchable. Your freedom is their nightmare, your clarity is their undoing, and you're not just walking away. You're snapping the spell. You're rewiring your entire nervous system to say, I am not afraid of them anymore. You're taking your voice back. You're taking your story back. You're saying, no more emotional voodoo. No more psychological magic tricks. I see behind the curtain now. This is more than personal growth. This is spiritual warfare. This is reclaiming sacred ground, because every time they gaslit you, they tried to colonize your mind. Every time they tripped you, They were trying to rewrite your inner truth. But not anymore. That spell no longer works on a soul that's come home to itself. They may try to enchant you again with flattery, with rage, with guilt, with nostalgia, but you've seen the strings behind the puppet show. You know the magician's secret. You know the game, and you're not impressed anymore. That's the real power, when you can look at the same behavior that used to cripple you and now say, I see what this is, and I'm not playing. This isn't about revenge. It's about release. It's not about proving them wrong. It's about proving to yourself that you were never weak. You were just under a spell. You were hypnotized by charm, by fear, by hope. And waking up from that is the bravest thing a person can do. Don't downplay that. You broke the trance. That's rare. That's sacred. You are now standing in a place the narcissist can never reach reality. Grounded, unshaken, and anchored in your truth. They live in a fantasy where they are kings and queens of other people's minds. But you've exited that kingdom. You've torn off the emotional shackles. You are no longer susceptible to their story. And that's what scares them the most. Not your anger, not your boundaries, but your vision. Your ability to see them, truly see them, not the mask, not the performance, but the emptiness behind the throne. Because when you see them clearly, they lose their power. Illusions can't survive in the light of awareness. You owe it to yourself to stay in that light, to resist the urge to explain, to resist the pull to fix them, because that's the old spell trying to reattach itself. You are not their healer. You are not their project. You are not their emotional hostage. You are your own person, and that realization is the final sword through the heart of their illusion. Let them fear it. Let them panic. Let them spin their webs. You've already flown away. You don't need to fight them. You just need to stay awake. Stay awake to who you are. Stay awake to the truth. Stay awake to the voice inside you that says, their power was never real, and now I see it. Because once the illusion is broken, it can never be reassembled. And that's what makes this sentence so powerful. Their power is an illusion. And I just snapped the spell. Not someday, not next week. Now, you've done it. You've taken back your mind, and no one, can take that from you again. You don't get to speak into my life anymore. There comes a time when you have to close the door. Not with anger, but with authority. Not with bitterness, but with boundaries. And that time is now. When you look at the narcissist and say, you don't get to speak into my life anymore. You are not just cutting off communication. You are cutting off contamination. You are finally drawing a line in the sand that says, my soul is no longer available for your projection. Because for far too long, you allowed their voice to echo in your mind. Long after the conversations ended, long after the relationship crumbled, their words lived on inside you like poison. They became your inner critic, your second guessing, your hesitation. You weren't just haunted by what they did. You were haunted by what they said. The lies, the digs, the emotional daggers dressed as advice. They convinced you they were the expert on you, that they knew your intentions better than you did, that their disappointment defined your identity. They used shame like a scalpel, carving up your confidence and calling it tough love. They gaslit your intuition and called it correction. But now that voice, that false prophet in your head, it has no more power. When you say, you don't get to speak into my life anymore, you're revoking access. You're changing the locks to your emotional house. You're refusing to be the dumping ground for someone else's unhealed wounds. It's not about punishing them. It's about protecting you, because their words were not reflections. They were infections, and you are done being sick with someone else's sickness. This isn't about closing your heart. It's about opening your eyes. You see now how they used words like weapons, how they wrapped cruelty in concern, how they made every conversation a courtroom where you were always on trial, and now the trial is over. You are declaring a mistrial on every lie they ever sentenced you with. Understand this, narcissists don't want dialogue, they want dominance, they don't offer feedback. They issue verdicts, and they don't speak to connect. They speak to control. but that control depended on your permission. Your willingness to let their voice override your own, and now your permission has been revoked. It doesn't matter if they're still in your life or only in your memory. Their voice doesn't get to narrate your future. Not anymore, because your healing demands new language, words that build, not break, words that affirm, not assassinate, words that come from within you, not from someone who couldn't love you unless you were broken enough to need them. The silence that follows your sentence might feel terrifying at first, but in that silence, you'll start to hear a new voice, your own, the one that was buried beneath years of manipulation, the one that whispers truth when shame tries to shout, the one that says, "You are worthy, you are whole, you are not what they said you were." And they'll feel that silence too. Make no mistake, the narcissist thrives on your attention, even if it's negative. So when you go quiet, not out of fear, but out of focus, they will notice. They will test your resolve. They will try to bait you back into the old dynamic with praise, provocation, or pity. But remember, that's not a bridge they want to rebuild. That's a leash they want to reattach. You are not cold for protecting your peace. You are not cruel for setting a boundary. You are not heartless for cutting off access to someone who only ever used your heart as a battlefield. You are wise, you are awake, and you are no longer interested in renting out space in your spirit to a voice that never had your best interests in mind. Because the words we allow and shape the beliefs we build our lives on. And the narcissist's words were always about distortion, not direction. They didn't speak life. They spoke limitation. They didn't speak truth. They spoke trauma. And now, with 6 powerful words, you are canceling that subscription. You don't get to speak into my life anymore. This is the voice of your next chapter, the voice of a person who has reclaimed authorship. You're not a character in their story anymore. You're the writer of your own, and you choose the dialogue, you choose the tone. You choose who gets a voice in your sacred space, and who gets deleted from the script entirely. Let them call you selfish. Let them call you heartless. Let them call you crazy. Those are just echoes of the old illusion trying to survive. But it can't, because now you have a new language, one of truth, of clarity, of sovereignty. You don't need their feedback to validate your growth. You don't need their praise to believe in your power. You've made your decision, and it is final, not because you're angry, but because you're free, free to rise, free to heal, free to define your identity on your own terms, and the narcissist can't handle that freedom, because it means their control is dead. And their voice, no matter how loud, is now irrelevant. You don't need a war to win. You just need to walk away with your voice intact. Because in the end, your silence will be louder than any argument, and your peace will be more deafening than any scream. You don't have to yell it. You don't even have to say it out loud. But when you decide deep in your soul that they no longer get to speak into your life, that's the sentence that ends the cycle. Your absence is the loudest sentence they'll ever hear. There's a kind of power that doesn't need noise. It doesn't need a fight. It doesn't need one last explanation or one final attempt to be understood. That kind of power comes in silence, in stillness, in the decision to walk away without flinching, without apologizing, and without leaving the door cracked open for them to crawl back in. That kind of power is your absence. The narcissist feeds on your presence, your reactions, your emotions, your availability. You don't even realize it, but your existence in their world validates theirs. They don't just want attention, they want control. They want to know that even in chaos, they still get to be the center. And that's why your absence is their deepest wound. Because your absence screams a truth they can't handle. They no longer matter to you. You see, the narcissist survives on a lie, that they are the gravity in the universe of every person they manipulate. They believe you orbit them, whether through love, anger, or grief. But when you vanish, when you go no contact, not to punish, but to protect, you shatter that illusion. You strip away their imagined importance. You pull back every ounce of your energy and say, without saying it, you no longer get to exist in my reality. And make no mistake, they hear that sentence. Loud and clear, not in words, but in the echo of your absence, in the silence that used to be filled with your justifications, in the void that used to be filled with your emotional labor, in the peace they cannot access because you took your light, your empathy, and your essence with you. At first, they will pretend not to care. That's the mask, the detachment, the indifference, the fake laughter online. But underneath that, they're rattled, shaken, panicked, because for the first time, you're not chasing, you're not defending, you're not trying to win them back. You're gone, and in your going, you've told them everything they fear the most. They were never that important. The narcissist doesn't fear your anger. They feed off it. They don't fear your confrontation. They twist it into more manipulation, but your absence, that's the one thing they can't reframe. They can't twist silence. They can't gaslight distance. They can't control what they can't reach. And that terrifies them. This isn't about ghosting. It's about boundaries. It's about spiritual survival. You're not disappearing out of pettiness. You're exiting because staying was costing you your soul. You are reclaiming your life force from the parasitic presence of someone who used your kindness as a leash. And that departure is your greatest act of rebellion. You used to wonder if walking away would make you weak. But now you see it clearly. Staying was what made you weak. Staying meant abandoning yourself over and over again just to hold a peace that was never real to begin with. But your absence now, it is a declaration. I choose me. They'll try to bait you back. Through guilt, through rage, through fake vulnerability, through the old tricks that used to work. But you've upgraded. You've healed just enough to see that no apology is enough to rebuild a home you never felt safe in. You don't want their words. You don't need their validation. What you need is your peace. And now you have it, and here's the twist. They'll remember you forever. Not for what you said, not for how loudly you fought, but for the quiet way you walked out and never looked back. Your absence will haunt them, not because of ego, but because they lost access to something they'll never find against. Someone who genuinely cared. And now they know they can't recreate that, because what you gave came from a pure heart, and their heart is a counterfeit. Let them pretend you were the problem. Let them smear your name. Let them spin the narrative, because none of it changes the truth. And that truth is anchored in your silence, in your calm, in your decision to build a life that has no room for manipulation, gaslighting, or emotional theft. The most devastating thing you'll ever do to a narcissist is not rage. It's not confrontation. It's not revenge. It's healing, quietly, privately, permanently. You getting healthy is the end of their game. You stepping into your worth is the collapse of their control. You living in joy without them is the sentence they'll never be able to serve. Your absence isn't just distance. It's a message. It says, you no longer have access to me. I no longer need your approval. Your opinion no longer shapes my reality. And that message is thunderous, because for the narcissist, being ignored is worse than being hated. At least hate gives them a role to play, but indifference erases them. You don't have to explain your absence. You don't have to justify your peace. Healing isn't a debate. It's a decision. And you've made it. You've chosen to become unavailable to chaos, immune to guilt, and liberated from the toxic cycle that once held you hostage. So if you've ever wondered what sentence will echo in a narcissist's mind forever, it's not a phrase you say out loud. It's the echo of your absence. It's the silence that follows your final step out the door. It's the life you build when they are no longer in it. Because nothing is louder than the peace they can't destroy. You thought I was weak. That was your biggest mistake. There's a moment in every survivor's story where the roles flip. The abuser, the manipulator, the narcissist. They've spent so long seeing you as weak, fragile, dependent. But one day you rise. One day you stop trying to prove your worth and instead you own it. And in that moment, the very thing they misunderstood about you becomes your greatest weapon, your resilience. Because when you say, you thought I was weak, that was your biggest mistake. You're not just talking to them, You're talking to every lie they ever fed you. You see, narcissists don't prey on the truly weak. They prey on the strong who don't yet know their power. They look for people with light, with empathy, with deep wells of love, and then they work to break it down. Because if they can convince you that your softness is weakness, your loyalty is stupidity, and your boundaries are selfishness, they win. But what they fail to understand is this: you were never weak. You were just kind, and now that kindness has been forged in fire. They mistook your patience for passivity. They thought your forgiveness meant forgetfulness. They believed that because you cried, you were broken. But what they didn't know was that your tears weren't surrender. They were the storm before the uprising. You were processing, not quitting. You were healing, not hiding. You were preparing for the moment you'd stand in your truth with nothing to prove and nothing to lose. Weakness would have stayed. Weakness would have kept explaining. Weakness would have begged. But you stopped asking them to see your value. You stopped trying to convince a blind person to see your worth. And in doing so, you walked into your strength. A strength they can't control. A strength they can't steal. A strength they now fear, because it proves them wrong. This new version of you, the one who no longer needs their validation, the one who sees through the manipulation, the one who says no, without guilt and yes, without permission. This version is a threat to everything they built their identity on. Because your independence exposes their insecurity, your confidence reveals their cowardice, your healing reveals their harm, they'll try to rewrite the story, of course. They always do. They'll call you cold, heartless, delusional, but that's not truth. It's projection. It's panic. Because now they see that what they thought was weakness was actually endurance. You took everything they threw at you, and you rose. They broke every rule of love, and you still found a way to keep loving yourself. You weren't weak. You were focused. You were building. You were gathering every piece of your shattered self and creating a version of you they never imagined would emerge. And now that version is standing in full light, no longer asking for the narcissist to approve, accept, or applaud. Because you've realized something vital: their opinion was never your truth. They feared the day you'd wake up and remember who you are. And that day has come. Now you don't chase closure. You create it. You don't seek justice. You embody it. You don't explain your worth. You walk in it. You've gone from victim to victor, from confused to clear, from broken to bold. And in that transformation, you've become everything they tried to prevent you from becoming. Let them talk. Let them spin the lies. Let them try to recreate the illusion. Because every word they speak now is an echo of their own fear. Fear of the truth you've embraced. Fear of the strength you've reclaimed. Fear of the power you now wield simply by living in your authenticity. You thought I was weak. That was your biggest mistake. Because I am the storm you didn't see coming. I am the peace you will never reach. I am the healing that proves your destruction didn't define me. I am the survivor you underestimated, and the warrior who no longer flinches when your name comes up. They expected you to stay small, to stay hurt, to stay available, but you grew, you leveled up. You faced your pain instead of bypassing it. You felt every wound so you could finally stop bleeding, and now that you've emerged on the other side, you're unrecognizable to them. And that's the point. This is your era of no apologies. This is your season of standing tall. You no longer shrink to fit their comfort. You no longer trade truth for peace. You no longer play the role they cast you in. You rewrote the entire script. And now the spotlight is on you. Not because you need their attention, but because your light can't be hidden anymore. They thought they broke you. They thought they silenced you. They thought you would never rise. But what they really did was train you. Every betrayal was a lesson. Every lie was a red flag. Every wound became a doorway to wisdom. And now you walk with clarity, with strength, with fire. You thought I was weak. You thought you had me figured out, but I was never weak. I was waking up. And now that I'm fully awake, your biggest mistake is clear. You underestimated the one thing that could never be controlled: my will to survive. I know who I am now. And that's the end of your game. There comes a moment, a breaking point, that turns into a becoming point. A moment where your identity no longer comes from how others see you, but from the truth you finally see in yourself. And once that moment happens, the narcissist loses every ounce of power they ever had. Because when you say, "I know who I am now," what you're really declaring is this: I'm no longer available for your lies, your games, or your illusions. For too long, your identity was a battlefield. You were defined by their moods, measured by their approval. You questioned your reality because they made sure you lived inside theirs. They told you who you were, what you deserved, and how small you needed to be to keep the peace. And you believed them, until you didn't. You see, narcissists can only manipulate a person who's uncertain about their own worth. They can only twist the truth if you're unsure of your own voice. But the second you wake up, the moment you reclaim your self-definition, that's when their mask shatters. Because their game requires confusion, and you've become crystal clear. You no longer accept half, love, and call it loyalty. You no longer shrink when they raise their voice. You no longer doubt yourself because of their accusation. Why? Because now you've seen what they never wanted you to realize. You were whole the entire time. They just needed you to feel broken so they could stay powerful. The real power move isn't screaming back. It isn't posting a revenge story. It's standing in the mirror, looking yourself in the eyes and knowing, really knowing, that you are not who they made you believe you were. You are strong. You are intuitive. You are enough. And most importantly, you are not theirs anymore. Once you know who you are, you stop needing closure. You stop searching for answers they'll never give. You stop trying to make sense of someone who operates in chaos. The game ends, not because they quit playing, but because you stopped participating. You walked off their stage. You dropped the script. You exited the illusion. The narcissist may still throw tantrums, may still bait you, may still try to pull strings they no longer have access to. But none of it sticks anymore, because when you're rooted in identity, manipulations bounce off like pebbles against steel. You're not moved by their guilt trips. You're not fazed by their silence. You're not triggered by their drama. You are anchored. Knowing who you are doesn't mean you're invincible. It means you're unshakable. You can still feel pain, but you're no longer defined by it. You might still remember the trauma, but you refuse to live inside it. You carry your scars as symbols of strength, not shame. And that shift, that inner revolution, that's what ends the game. They thrived when you were questioning yourself. They panicked when you began questioning them. But now that you stand in your truth, now that you've owned your story, they have no more weapons left. Because the strongest armor is self-awareness, and you wear it like a crown. This isn't just healing. This is transformation. The person you were back then was surviving. The person you are now is sovereign. They tried to define you through control. You redefined yourself through clarity. And that clarity is terrifying to a narcissist. Because it means you'll never be controlled again. They'll try to revisit old dynamics. They'll try to remind you of who you used to be. But that door has closed. That version of you is gone, buried. And in its place stands someone who has done the work, faced the pain, and come out with fire in their soul and peace in their bones. They can lie about you, but they can't lie to you anymore. You see through the fog. You hear the double meanings. You feel the energy shift when their manipulation tries to creep in. But you don't flinch. You don't freeze. You see it and you walk away. You don't need them to admit what they did. You don't need an apology that will never be honest. You don't need a witness to validate your experience. Why? Because now you are your own witness. You trust your memory. You trust your intuition. You trust yourself. Knowing who you are changes everything. It changes what you tolerate. It changes who you allow access to your heart. It changes what you give your energy to, and the narcissist knows it. That's why they fear it. Because once you step into that power, you are no longer a source of supply. You are a mirror reflecting the emptiness of their manipulation. This is your freedom song. This is your new standard. This is the line in the sand where the old you ends and the real you begins. You know who you are now, and that knowing is the end of their game, forever. Your power is the narcissist's worst nightmare. There comes a time in life when everything you thought you lost becomes the very fuel that sets your soul on fire. The heartbreak, the betrayal, the confusion. The years wasted walking on eggshells, the time you spent questioning your reality, the endless cycles of false hope and broken promises. You thought it was all for nothing, but now you see the truth. That pain was your rebirth. Every tactic they used to break you down was a step closer to your awakening. Every gaslight, every smear, every manipulation. It all became the forge where your identity was reforged in truth. Because you didn't just survive the narcissist, you transcended them. You went from asking, "What's wrong with me?" to declaring, "You will never define me again." You don't need to expose them anymore. The moment you speak that one sentence, "I know who I am now," you already have. That's the siren call of your freedom. That's the earthquake that shakes the very foundation of their delusion. Because narcissists don't fear revenge. They don't fear confrontation. What they truly fear is your clarity, your silence, your self-respect, your detachment. They relied on your confusion. They needed your over-explaining. They fed off your guilt, but those things are gone. You've stepped out of the fog. You've shut off the gaslight. You've stopped looking for closure in the same place that caused the wound, and that decision alone, that evolution, is louder than any scream. You're no longer playing their game. You're not interested in making them understand. You don't care who believes them, because you've realized that peace was never about getting justice from them. It was about giving truth to yourself. And that truth is this: you were never weak. You were always powerful. Just buried beneath lies you didn't deserve to carry. They fear you now, not because you've become cruel, but because you've become unreachable. They can't access the version of you who tolerated crumbs. They can't control the person who no longer seeks their love. You're free, and freedom, that's the one thing a narcissist can never fake, never manipulate, and never take away once you own it. So what's the one sentence that will make a narcissist fear you forever? I know who I am now. Because in that moment the illusion breaks, the mask slips, the power flips, and they realize. They lost control the second you remembered your worth. So walk forward, eyes open. Shoulders back, soul blazing, because the past no longer owns you. The narcissist no longer defines you, and the future belongs to the real you. You are no longer theirs. You are finally, fully yours.